Sometimes you think what you see is what you get, and the past equals the future, right? But the bottom line is it's never too late to make a shift.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters Podcast, the ultimate resource for ambitious, hardworking school owners that want to get their business and their life to the next level. My name is Dave Kovar. I'm a lifetime martial artist, business owner, speaker, and author. My goal is to empower listeners with the knowledge and the tools they need to break through barriers and really get their business and their life to the next level. Thanks for watching and enjoy.
Welcome to the Satori Masters Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kovar. I'm actually going to do a solo program today. I wanted to talk to you. The concept here is the 10-year student. Imagine you're in a perfect world. Imagine if every martial arts student that started at your school trained with you for a decade. What a difference that would make in your community and, of course, in the success of your school, etc. So I want to kind of give you some strategies kind of using that in mind. But before I do that, I want to share a couple stories. So this is the first one. Has to do with a friend of mine, a gentleman named Keith Hafner. If you've been in business a long time, you will have heard of Keith Hafner. He's an amazingly successful martial arts school operator in Ann Arbor, Michigan. You don't hear much about him anymore. He's just doing his own thing. But back in the 90s, when the Educational Funding Company, which was founded by Nick Kokinos, was really blossoming. By the way, for those of you guys in the martial arts world, regardless of the consultant that you have, if you have a consultant, almost everyone can trace their heritage to Nick Kokinos and Educational Funding Company. He was a very influential person that really influenced so many of the processes that happened in the United States. So anyway, in the 90s, in about 1990, I was honored to join the board of directors for Educational Funding Company. And there was, I think, about 12 people in the group, and there were guys like Dennis Brown and Stephen Oliver and Keith Hafner. And oh man, I'm going to miss a whole bunch of people here. David Deaton, Buzz Durkin, Jim Clapp. Did I say Dennis Brown? I think I did. Greg Tierney. It was an incredible. My brother Tim, Steve LaValle. It was really a group of high-level martial arts school operators, and we used to have these board meetings, and we'd meet 2 or 3 times a year, and we would basically be in this boardroom, and there would be 10, 12 of us, and Mr. Kokinos for a couple of days would just get us to think differently and grill us on these ideas. And he really start. First off, it was like, are your stats right? And what stats should you be keeping track of? And marketing and looking at the business different. It was really incredible. And Keith Hafner was the guy. Some of you guys that are older remember the E.F. Hutton commercial. So it was kind of like, what is it? When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen, right? Well, Keith didn't say a lot in the meetings, but anytime that someone would call upon him and Mr. Kokinos would say, Keith, what do you think about that? Everybody would sit up and take their pen out because we knew Keith was going to say something profound. And what was interesting about Keith at the time, his school was not that successful. He was doing fine. He was making a living, but the general consensus among all of us was, here's this guy that had amazing potential, but wasn't really living up to it. And then interesting thing happened. This would have been like the mid 90s now. We were doing one of our board meetings. It was in Bermuda. And I remember at that day, Keith decided, you know what? I've been distracted. I've been all over the place. I at the time he was like a chess, like super high, like grandmaster, maybe not grandmaster, but high chess player. He was a real big sports fan. He was in all these things. And he said, you know what? I'm changing my priorities. And he made running his family and his religion, his family, and his really business, the primary things of his life. And he's just started doubling down. And all of a sudden his school grew like crazy. And he was billing just amazing numbers back in the day. And he had just a really remarkable school and still does to this day. So the point, why do I share that story with you? Because for me, what that story was here's somebody that for years had just been kind of doing okay, sliding along. And sometimes you think what you see is what you get, and the past equals the future, right? But the bottom line is it's never too late to make a shift. So wherever you are in your school, however long you've been running your school, it's never too late to go, you know what? I can get better. I can change. I can refocus. And that's what Keith did. I want to share another story that's just kind of the exact opposite. I'm doing a seminar, and I'll never forget. It's my first time doing a series of seminars. Actually, my second time being in Australia, and I was in Sydney. And I've been to probably Australia doing martial arts seminars probably 10 or 12 times now. I love Australia. I have so many great Australian friends, and the martial arts is so good out there, and the people are just genuine. And anyway, this one particular seminar I'm doing in downtown Sydney. and there's about 50 people there, and I'm doing a business seminar, and there's this one guy that's sitting in the second row with his arms crossed, and he's totally disengaged in everything that I'm saying, and to the point to where it's kind of distracting. It's kind of like, I've got all these people that are engaged and paying attention and playing full out, and I got this one guy that's sitting there just kind of like this little black hole, this energy sucker, right? And so during the break, I'm thinking, hey, maybe I just read him wrong, and I walk up and I say, hey man, nice to meet you. And he goes, yeah, hey, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I know everything you've said so far. And I go, okay, well, and it kind of irritated me. I go, if you want, if you want, you can have your money back. You can leave right now if you want. And he goes, no, I'm gonna stick around and see if there's anything that, that you have that's any good. And then the rest of the day, whenever something would come up, he'd raise his hand and basically say, that won't work for me here. That won't work in my area. And how many times have I heard that? And by the way, I understand sometimes there are some unique things to certain areas, but in general, what will work one place works in another place. And what was interesting is that guy, when we finally grilled him, people were, at the end of the day, people were just kind of tired of hearing him speak. And because he'd been talking about, he'd been teaching for 35 years, he had a school. And well, it turned out that his wife was the breadwinner, and his school was he was a full-time school, but he only had 35 members and he never made any money. Right. And but his students were good. We guys have all heard that theory. So it was just really the contrast between somebody being closed-minded and then someone like Keith Hafner, who was just a really sharp guy, but not fully applying himself, finally saying, I'm going to do this. I'm all in. And so why do I share that with you? Wherever you are in your school right now, if you can find a way, if you can be all in, then wherever you're at, you can get to the next level. Because really, remember, you're never going to arrive. Success is something you got to go for every day. And all you really need is momentum, right? So what I want to talk to you today, the topic is the 10-year student. I want to give you some ideas as to what you can do to enhance your retention, to keep members longer. Okay. So to start out with, one of the concepts that I think, and many of you guys, if you ever heard me speak before, you've heard this, but I need to go through it because it's basics. It's so important, is remember the 5 mindsets of running a martial arts school. We're the friendliest place in town. We're the cleanest place in town. We only teach great classes, never just good classes. We're excellent at student-parent communication. And the 5th one, every day we look for opportunities to recruit new members. Let's talk about them very quickly. First one, we're the friendliest place in town. Bottom line is, man, if someone was to walk into your school this evening, not just the head instructor, but oozing from the whole feel of the school is a sense of welcomeness, right? Remember, it's very intimidating to come into a martial arts school for the first time. And the sooner you can make somebody feel appreciated and welcome, the better off they're going to be. So that's number one. Okay. And by the way, if you haven't done this lately, you ought to set your beginner kids class down on top of all your other ones, of course, and just simply say, hey, when you guys first started, or you guys have been training for a few months, hey, Mr. Yellow Belt there, who helped you when you first started? Oh, Bobby, he's an orange belt now. He showed me where I put my shoes, made me feel welcome. Well, guess what? That's your job now. If any of you guys see a student that you don't know, it's your job to go up and introduce yourself to them. So imagine if that was the kind of the environment you created. That's the first one. Number 2 is we are the cleanest place in town. And what does that mean? Hey, man, that's something's within our control. You can't, I get it, 7:00 in the evening when it's a busy night, man, it's not always spotless, but in general, what can you do to keep the place looking good? Because that really, remember, cleanliness breeds professionalism. Okay. The third one is we only teach great classes, never just good classes. And, I'm amazed, to me, I'm amazed by how many people really, they put all their effort in all these other areas, and then their classes are only mediocre. And maybe there was a time when the industry was different, and maybe the supply and demand was different, to where you could have okay or decent classes and still do well. But if you're going to thrive as a school, your students have to, your classes have to be excellent. And by the way, I know, man, not every class is excellent. I've taught plenty of mediocre classes, but I'd like to think when I step out on the floor, my intention is to make it a great class. Okay. So we only teach great classes, never just good classes. That's the third one. Fourth one is we are excellent at student-parent communication. What the heck does that mean? Well, bottom line is that the more connected we can be with our students, the more we can give them details about where they're going. Remember, feedback is the breakfast of champions. So what does that mean? I want to be giving parents and kids feedback on how they're doing. I also, not just that, I want to make sure that if a bunch of people show up when you're supposed to be closed on Friday night due to a special event, and a bunch of people show up, that's on you, right? Are you able to really get the word out and make sure that you're communicating clear with all your student body? The final one is every day we look for opportunities to recruit new members. not too many people. I do know some people that have waiting lists that are full. They have no room in their school. Okay, there's not a lot of those, but there are a few. But even if that was the case, you still should be recruiting because there's a lag time, right? The marketing that you do now doesn't always affect us right now. Sometimes it affects us, months in the future. So if you're thinking, oh man, I got more students than I can handle right now, I'm not going to do any marketing. Well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be fine for a month or two, and then you're going to look around. You're going to go, holy moly, where are all the new members? And then it's going to take a while to get that lag time made up. So you're always looking for opportunities to recruit new members. And by the way, remember that what we are doing is not selling some used car, some worthless trinkets. What we do changes lives. And once we get our head around that and remember that should give us the courage to approach people when we see them. For example, you see a parent watching their kids' class and you look over and you go, man, I wonder if they're interested in martial arts. Oh, I don't want to bug them. Do you realize that they could be one conversation away from getting involved in the program? And, great, we need more members. It's always nice to have more members, but you could give them their youth back. So you really owe it to them, right? You really owe it to them to get them involved as much as possible. So those are the 5. So as a base, now, if we do that on a regular basis, if you did nothing else but make sure that you were friendly to everyone, your place was clean, you taught great classes, you were really good with parent communication and student communication, and every day you try to recruit new members, that really goes a long ways. That's 80% of being successful right there, maybe more. Okay, now of course, there's more details that go into it, but man, that gets you a long way, and that's the foundational stuff. All right, so what I want to do is I wanted to talk, once again, the 10-year student. What kind of things can we do to really retain students for the long haul? And what I want to do is I didn't want to talk like a lot of detail. I wanted to go very basic stuff that's easy to really to adapt and think about. So there's 3 things at the very beginning of someone's training within the first, hopefully, few weeks that if you can hit these 3 steps, then you have a really good chance of getting people over that 100-day hump. And we know, if you keep your stats, we know that in almost every martial arts school in the country, the biggest dropout level is at the beginner level. Okay, so step number 1 is to get them in the habit of coming to class. So what does that mean? So just because someone enrolled today, how many times in my career have I thought, oh, great, the Smith family just enrolled, they're going to be around for a long time, only to find out 2 weeks later they haven't come back, right? Quick story. So I'm 16 years old. This would have been April 1970, maybe I'm 17, 1976. I'm managing my instructor, Bruce Jutnick's Low-K school while he's on vacation in Hawaii for a week. So I enroll on a Wednesday. I enroll a dad and his 2 teenage boys in the school. And I was so excited because that's the first time I ever did an enrollment process, right? And I was, so guess what? A couple months later, I'm going through the books and I realized those guys are no longer training. And it totally caught me off guard. And I'm embarrassed to say, for 30 years, I was surprised to see people not training. My old paradigm was, oh, now that you're enrolled, you're going to be here for a long time. You're probably going to get your black belt. My new paradigm is, just because you're enrolled doesn't mean anything. You're probably going to quit very quickly, unless I do everything in my powers to keep you as a student. And so the first step is get them in the habit of coming to class. Most people don't quit because they don't necessarily like the program. It's because they never developed the habit of coming to class. So that's why I'm a big fan of standing appointments. If you're supposed to be there on a Monday, Wednesday after you enrolled, and you show up on a Monday and you're not there on a Wednesday, the sooner that I can reach out to you, the more likely I am to help you get that habit of coming to class. Okay. By the way, once you've been there coming for a few months, that's just what you do. So there's a great phrase: good habits are hard to make but easy to live with. Bad habits are easy to make but hard to live with. It's hard to get in the habit of training on a regular basis in martial arts, but once it becomes habit, it's way easier to live with. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is help them develop a love for martial arts. I call it a white belt moment or an aha moment. Every one of you guys, somewhere in your training, there was you after class or during class, or you thought, oh man, I love this stuff. And by the way, you can have more than one white belt moment, and some people don't have their white belt moment till they're a brown belt. The whole point is that the sooner you can help people fall in love with martial arts. Now, you're not going to go, this is your white belt moment. You're going to fall in love with martial arts right now. You don't know what it's going to be, but you try to facilitate an environment where you're really paying attention to what's going on, right? And you're setting them up for success. So yeah, I ask this question in instructor colleges all the time. I have people break into small groups and I have them the groups like use 3 or 4 people. And I say, what was your white belt moment? And we talk as a group what they were. And it's really interesting to see what my white belt moments are. Sometimes Okay. It's what I would expect it to be the first time that they broke a board, right? Or the first time they scored a point or they passed someone's guard or something like that. But sometimes it's when I got kicked by my instructor, I go, wow, I want to be able to hit that hard. Or, who knows what it is. But the deal is that we want in general, what we want to do is we want to make sure that people experience success. Okay. I just got an essay from one of our teenage students that wrote an essay that just got their first belt. They've been training for 2 months. And it's this beautiful essay that she detailed her first class and how she was feeling when she came in and how nervous she was and how she overcame. And it was just a great reminder, man. Someone stepped on the floor, it's pretty intimidating. What can you do to make them feel comfortable? In this essay, she commented on how friendly everybody is and how welcoming everybody was. And then she was trying to learn a round kick and how difficult it was. And finally the light bulb kind of went on, right? Well, so that's what we want to do with our beginner students is we want to just set them up for success, be there and catch them when they do things right, so we can comment on it to help them develop that aha moment. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is get them thinking long term. That's why, like, if you go to many schools, you'll say we're a black belt school. What the heck does that mean, right? Well, so kind of the meaning behind that is that this is something that we expect you to do for several years, and we're going to help you get there. But the sooner that you can get people thinking long term, and that starts right out of the gate. Like one of the things that I'll do is when I go visit one of our locations and I meet some parent who's got an orange belt, a daughter who's 8 years old, and I'll walk up and say, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, hi, Marcia, how are you? Nice to meet you." And I'll look at the mom and I'll go, she's going to be training with us till she gets her black belt, don't you? Right. And then if possible, I'll look out of the mat and I'll see some young assistant instructor and I'll say, see Joyce out there? She actually started about the same age, and look at her now. Yeah. She's a secondary black belt. Yeah. So I'll try to make those comparisons as much as I possibly can so people can kind of see the future if they keep their child involved. And so that's really, for me, that's really the meaning of the Black Belt Club, is to get people thinking and committed towards training for the long haul, so to speak. All right. Because if you don't have those 3 things, get them in the habit of coming to class, help them develop a love for martial arts, that white belt moment, and get them thinking long term. There's too many distractions along the way for them there's a lot can happen between first class and black belt that could give them a reason to quit. Right. So we want to try to think ahead as to what those things are. Okay. Moving on. I wanted to cover some, just kind of general retention stuff, and pretty much everything I'm going to tell you, you already know, but sometimes we just need to be reminded about that. Okay. So super important is keep your students challenged. So one of the things that I've realized is that I could do a better job with is with my advanced students and with my black belts is sometimes I assume, hey man, they've been training forever, they're never going to go anywhere, only for them to drift off. And so often because I didn't keep them challenged. And part of that is just sitting down with your advanced students and saying, hey man, what are your martial arts goals? What are you working on? And then giving them feedback on their performance. Okay. So why are things like mud runs and Spartan races and marathons and all this kind of stuff? Why do people like to do that? People like a challenge. Okay. And so that's something that I strongly encourage you to make sure that you are on a regular basis challenging your students. And one of the things that you can do is literally is sometimes, let's just say, of an adult advanced class, just, you get them all warmed up and have them pair off with a partner and have them, all right, guys, for the next 3 minutes, this is what I want you to do. I want you to talk about the challenges you've overcome in your martial arts journey and your future goals. Go and just let them talk back and forth. And then you can say, all right, break, who's got one? And pretty soon people are commenting on this. This is the challenge. By the way, it's really educational as an instructor to hear what their challenges were, because they're not always what you think they would have been. And then to hear people kind of recommit to their training. Okay. So try to keep your students challenged. Okay. With, by the way, age and skill appropriate material, by the way. Okay. The number 2 is encourage socialization. What the heck do I mean by encourage socialization? So during class, we don't want the kids socializing, right? But what's really interesting is that we don't just want them, we always try to stress discipline. Most martial arts programs, you come in, you bow, you stand at attention stance, you do a polite greeting, you don't talk until you're supposed to. It's very disciplined, right? Which is, it's important. That's I think that's really important. But what happens is that I might train with someone for a whole hour and not really get to know them much better. Although there's an argument to say that if I'm actually training with someone, I'm getting to know them on a soul level, right? But so what can you do to have events where people actually get to socialize, right? There was if you've ever been to our schools, you'll know of a gal who has been a long time a friend and someone that's been a great friend of the company for 25 years, and that's Lisa Cox. She's been a part of the schools forever. And I remember years ago when she started, I identified right away after she started. This gal's a rock star, and fortunately, I had her for a couple of decades as my personal assistant. It was great. But anyway, in the process when she started, within the first couple of months when she started, there was 7 other adults that started about the same time. I'm sure there was more, but there's 7 of them that bonded, and they went through the ranks together, and they all got their black belts. And I promise you, if they didn't have that social bond amongst them, instead of 7, there would have been 1 or 2. But they held each other accountable, which is going to be the next point I'm going to talk about, by the way. But they had this social bond. So the more that you can get your students connected, special events, picnics, all that kind of stuff is so important, because it's hard for people to quit relationships. All right. The next one I just touched on, and that is this: hold them accountable. What do I mean by that? One of the most important things you can do is get in the habit of, when you're talking with your students, is asking them when they're going to come back to class again. Okay. Because the bottom line, let's just say you've got someone that's kind of losing interest. They're kind of flaky, and, they're just not having as much fun. And at the end of class, they're supposed to come Monday and Wednesday. It's Monday night. I say, hey, Bob, you going to be here this Wednesday? You coming back Wednesday? I'll see you Wednesday at 7. Okay, man. Now, that's not a guarantee he's going to be back Wednesday at 7. Let's just say Wednesday rolls around. He goes, oh, man, I don't really feel like going to class. I told Mr. Kovar I would. I guess I'll go. He shows up to class, and then he has that turnaround class. He's back in, because here's how our training goes. Our training doesn't go straight up. It's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It's like a jagged line, right? And so what happens is, when people are motivated, it's easy. They'll come back naturally. But those low spots, that's when they need that push. So the more consistently you can hold people accountable and make sure you get a commitment out of them to come back to class, the more likely you are to have them do that very thing. And the next one I want to talk about, which is so basic, be happy to see them. Be happy to see them. What the heck does that mean? The bottom line with that is that people will go where they feel appreciated. Last week I was at our headquarters school, and I was showing up to teach a class, and I walked through the lobby, and there was a guy in his mid-30s, with a baseball hat and a beard, and he had a child in his arm, and and he says, "Hey, Mr. Kovar." And I look over, and he looked vaguely familiar, and I said, "Hey, how you doing? You look familiar." And he goes, "Yeah, and he gave me his name. And he's a student that trained with us at the time he was 4 till the time he was about 20. He hasn't been back in like 15, 18 years. And he's back to enroll his son. And it was so cool to see him. Fortunately, I remembered him. As soon as he said his name, I remembered him, and I had this great conversation. But I could just feel the fact that I remembered and was happy to see him. First off, I sincerely was. But secondly, I also know I'm smart enough to know that me making him feel appreciated, really reconnects him to the school. And he just commented, "Man, it's so good to be back here. And I feel like I've never left," and et cetera, et cetera. And so the more you can do to create, to be happy to see your students. And that doesn't mean you have to, take, by the way, you ought to be happy to see your students. If you have to fake it, get another friggin' job. If you don't like people, what the heck are you doing? Right. But just so get in that habit of pre-framing an exciting class when students come into class. Okay. And when you see them, and by the way, the old thing about, like, hey, man, if someone shows up late, I'd never punish anybody for someone comes in there embarrassed, they're 5 minutes late. Usually if it's a kid's class, it's not even their fault, by the way. Or an adult comes in, they say, "Sorry, I'm late." I just say, "Hey, happy to see you. No worries. Happy to see you." And so the more we can just make that a habit, the better off that we can do. Now, I've talked about some really general stuff, but if you take it to heart, it can make a big difference. So let me just do a quick recap. First off, remember, your school is never going to be exactly the way you want it. There's always going to be room for improvement. No matter how good it is, there's always a way to make it better, right? By the way, if it's good, anchor it in and appreciate that. Okay. Because you worked hard to make that happen. But remember, we just need to keep our momentum moving in the right direction. So there's really, what can you do today? And then remember the 5 rules: friendly, clean, great classes, good communication, and recruit new members. And then remember the importance of, with an early time in their enrollment, get them in the habit of coming to class, help them develop that white belt moment, and get them thinking long term. And then next, ongoing training. What do you want to do with those? Is that you want to keep them challenged, encourage socializations, hold them accountable, and be happy to see them. And if you can do those things on a consistent basis, this is what's going to happen. All right. You are simply going to get people through the low spots, and you're going to see a lot more 10-year martial arts students. And if we can do that, man, of course it's good for business, but the impact that our business can have on our community is remarkable. If someone trains with us for a few months, they're going to benefit a little bit, but the real benefit is long-term training. So you'd really be serving your community well if you could follow through with that. So with that said, I appreciate you guys listening today, and all the best, and talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in today to our podcast. I hope you found it valuable and inspirational. To stay connected, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a 5-star review. And we really sincerely would appreciate some feedback. Your feedback helps us to create high quality content that will help others in the future. If you'd like to follow me, you can go to Dave Kovar on Facebook or Haunchie Dave Kovar on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on next episode.